Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar. We are tuning in tonight for yet another review show, but tonight with a bit of a twist. As you can see, we've got a new friendly face on our screens this evening, so we're very happy to be joined by Emma Smith. Emma, who is a BBC journalist, has just recently done an absolutely fantastic article, feature piece on the BBC about by Leverkusen. So we'll be talking to Emma about that and, of course, about the Bundesliga in general so far this season. So it's a bit of a, well, we're a third of the way through-ish. We can do a bit of a review, a bit of reflections. So I hope you all can sit back and enjoy along with us. First things first, Emma, how are you doing this evening?
I'm very good, thank you. Coming to you from a very cold and wet Salford, but otherwise I'm very good.
Excellent. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm just freezing, to be honest. Yeah, obviously over here in Nuremberg, it's about -5 over here, and I'm still getting over that 5-0 defeat from FC Nuremberg against Düsseldorf as well. So, yeah, pretty cold, but yeah, not too bad at all overall.
Excellent stuff. So, yeah, just before we get cracking, as per usual, please do smash a thumbs up on this video for having Emma on the show. That'd be fantastic. Really appreciate that. Any live comments or questions you have for us or for Emma, please don't be shy. Get them in. Be really appreciated. We have got some pre-set questions in general, but we'll try and prioritize any ones that come in live. And, of course, press that red button and subscribe to the channel. And keep on following us and also subscribe on podcasts as well. So yeah, we'll get started now then, and we'll start off with the title race and what's been going on so far this season. And Emma, well, we'll kickstart with with the current league leaders and in the shape of Leverkusen, and maybe we'll just start off with how good they've actually been so far this season, and maybe we can dig a little bit deeper into why that's been the case.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Leverkusen dropped points for the first time since facing Bayern on September the 15th this weekend, 1-1 draw. But I mean, they really have been fantastic this season, Leverkusen. It's meant that sort of like even the title race really is as open as it seems to be, as open as it's ever been. Although it's obviously very early days to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's been really exciting just having that refreshed challenger in a way, because Leverkusen obviously haven't been as higher up the league in the last few seasons, and since that man Xabi Alonso's come in, and I know that that's something that you really focused on your article, and his influence and how it wasn't obviously an immediate rise. Obviously, he won his first game. I think it was Schalke, wasn't it, which they won quite comfortably. But then they went through a little bit of a quieter phase. But what have you been impressed with from Alonso's point of view? What has he brought to this team? Is it just the winning mentality, or is there other parts that you've seen?
I mean, obviously you've got the winning mentality. I mean, if you've got Xabi Alonso in charge, then expect to have the winning mentality, because he was a born winner as a player, World Cup winner, Champions League winner, list of titles as long as your arm. But I mean, I think what has been really impressive about Alonso is about how he's come up with such a very clear strategy. I mean, it's a strategy based on, outscoring the opponents, about playing this set 3-4-3, devastating on the counter-attack, playing in a way that, creates so many chances that even if you are, as they are in the stats, outperforming XG, outperforming, scoring a huge proportion of their shots on goal, that they're creating these so many chances that you're going to outperform all the sort of the stats, and with playing in such a good way, playing in such an inventive passing way, that not only are they leading the table, they're doing it in such an entertaining way that it's impossible not to keep an eye on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I mean, obviously you were doing the watch along yesterday, which was great fun. Yourself and Peter. I mean, was there anything disappointing about the way that they played yesterday, or do you think it's just because Dortmund put so many players behind the ball and the fact that they went 1-0 up early doors, they couldn't quite do it and they couldn't quite score that second goal, which they've done every game so far this season? I mean, naturally with Bayern not playing this weekend, it hasn't had a tremendous impact on where they stand from a league point of view, but yeah, what have you thought? I mean, we've been waxing lyrical about them so much already this season. I guess it's quite obvious what we think.
Yeah, I thought they were brilliant yesterday as well, to be honest. That was my overall opinion. I think obviously myself and Peter covered the game on the watch along for Over the Bar, and I thought basically apart from the first 5 minutes, they were better side pretty much throughout the game. Palacios and Xhaka in that midfield, wow, they were superb. Like some of the passes they were threading through were just brilliant. I mean, Kosunu as well. He's a guy that we've not mentioned as much this season, but what a game he had, like bringing the ball out of the back. He was absolutely brilliant. I think probably the only two players you could criticize yesterday were ironically Boniface, because he missed a lot of chances and his positioning wasn't great. And also Frimpong, because he got behind Rierson probably 10 or 15 times in the game. And I think he only put one or two good crosses in. One of them, ironically, was for the goal disallowed as well at the end of the first half. But the performance in general was superb, and I don't see any reason to worry at all for them. I think, as I've mentioned, those three names, I think particularly Palacios, Xhaka, and obviously Kosunu are absolutely superb. Just what a team it is. Xabi Alonso has just got a fantastic system with that 3-4-2-1. I think probably the only criticism of him, I would have brought our friend Paddy Schick on a little bit earlier, to be honest. He obviously got the assist for the goal. He was really good when he came off the bench. Maybe that is something that, if they're not winning games a little bit earlier on, I'd like to see him make a few more maybe tactical substitutions. But it's only a small criticism because I just think they were brilliant as well yesterday. They should have won the game. They could have had a penalty as well, which was harshly turned down. But yeah, probably an 8 out of 10 performance despite not winning the game. But, still unbeaten well into December. So you can't really complain much.
Yeah, as you say, yeah, still really impressive. But Emma, I'll swing this over to you. Is 8 out of 10 good enough in a league when you've got Bayern Munich breathing down your neck constantly? Can you see Leverkusen keeping this up for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean that's the main issue, and obviously with the Bayern game being postponed, this was a real chance for Leverkusen to put some real distance between themselves and Bayern, which they against a very good opponent in Dortmund they weren't able to do. But there is that slight feeling of a chance foregone, because if they had got that, they would be 5 points clear. Bayern wouldn't be within a win of overtaking Leverkusen. If you consider the fact that Bayern game in hand is against the bottom side, you'd imagine they would find that win. And so in sort of real terms, if you look at outside the game in hand, you'd think that Bayern would probably be able to catch and overtake Leverkusen. That is the sort of the pressure that any team has if they're going for that Bundesliga title, which is that you do literally have to be note perfect when you're up against a winning machine like Bayern, and particularly when you've got, in the case of Leverkusen, the history that the never losing sort of or the Leverkusen tag that of not having won that title, of going so long without a trophy, that you sort of have that there are going to be those shakes that sort of like whenever there's any sort of drop points, it's like, is this the beginning of the latest collapse or the latest sort of near miss, which seems bizarre to say, given that this is only the second game in all competitions this season at which they failed to win. Yeah. But given the sort of the lay of the land in the Bundesliga and the history of Leverkusen, that is those questions will immediately come. But considering this is a Leverkusen side which is so much better and more coherent and well drilled and playing such better football than those that should come in before it in recent years, that you still want to think that this is the side that's going to book the recent Leverkusen trend.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna obviously watch it with great interest, and we'll stick with the title race for now, and then we'll move on as the show continues. And obviously, speaking of Bayern, Emma, it'd be wrong of us not to speak of our Harry Kane, and obviously the big move this summer, which I presume you would also have noticed this, the increased traffic, perhaps even from a on your end, from the BBC and things like that, more articles and things like that about the Bundesliga and perhaps raising its profile somewhat more amongst its English fans, of course, which is what we're trying to do on this show.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is increased interest. I mean, every single Bayern Munich match report is like the viewer count has increased exponentially this season compared to last. But I guess there's sort of double-edged sword that if you have like one leading, major player goes to a league, you sort of end up with a hyper focus on that player. Like, for example, there might be a lot more people who are paying attention to Inter Miami because of Lionel Messi, but they won't know much more about the MLS. And I think that there's a slight similar issue for the Bundesliga, which kind of made me sort of, when it came to Alonso's Leverkusen, being like, okay, so there's a lot of focus on Harry Kane and about how many goals he scored and how good Bayern Munich are, but they're still not top of the league. And why is that? And it's because they've found there's an opponent this year who are playing even better football, and that was worth focusing on. But certainly from taking it from a perspective of someone who doesn't cover the Bundesliga specifically and covering this season, there's a huge amount of interest in the Bundesliga, which has come through Harry Kane not only going to the Bundesliga but hitting the ground running to such an extent.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's something that we've seen on our end, isn't it, Mark? And like we always say about our show, we don't profess to be the be all and end all of everything from a Bundesliga perspective. But of course, we're English chaps who follow the Bundesliga with great passion, and seeing Harry Kane make that move over in the summer has been a real benefit for us, hasn't it, from the show's perspective? So, I mean, naturally, that's great for us following him, but also from a Bayern perspective, it just makes them that different level threat to what they were last season.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can even notice just when we put a tagline of Harry Kane in the title, we always get more views than we do when there's no Harry Kane on there. So I think that alone basically just tells you what you need to know. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely hit the ground running. It's not disappointed at all in terms of his performances. He's been absolutely fantastic, obviously, with 18 league goals already, not including, obviously, he's got a game in hand on the other teams as well. So that came in 12 games, which is just ridiculous, basically. Yeah. I think he's got, 5-6 in the Champions League as well. And I'm sure Man United aren't looking forward to coming up against him in a couple of weeks too, for that must-win game in the Champions League. But yeah, he's been absolutely fantastic. It's really interesting, obviously, because I also live in Germany as well. So it's interesting to see how he's settled as a native Englishman as well over in Germany. And from what I've seen, he seems to enjoy it as well. And from the German perspective, a lot of the local German people are really happy with him. They seem to think he's a really good guy, and they're a little bit jealous of England. England have got such a good number 9, to be honest, at the moment, because Germany can't boast that level of number 9. That's for sure. And I think we are lucky to have him from an English perspective, and also obviously myself and Rory being Bundesliga coverers, we're lucky to have him in the league as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From Bayern's perspective, let's be honest, they're going to be right there all season long. That's why Harry Kane's gone there. There's probably no need for us to delve too deeply into why that's going to be the case. We've seen, Kane strike up a really good partnership with, the really hot Leroy Sané, which has been really impressive. So, they'll be right up there. They'll be challenging for the Bundesliga and, of course, the Champions League as that goes on. And no, I'm not particularly looking forward to United playing Bayern whenever. Luckily, it's not this week. But anyway, yeah, we'll move on. Sorry, go on.
No, it's just like, I think from an English perspective, it's quite interesting how Man United fans sort of convincing themselves, oh well, Bayern don't have much to play for, they've won the league. Like maybe they'll let it off a little bit, as if. And it's like, I don't think you quite know Bayern Munich. Like if you think that if they're gonna take an easy and have an easy night of it, or let Man United have an easy night of it, I think you might be sorely mistaken.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, we saw it with their last Champions League game. They still went just as strong, just as hard. But Copenhagen were able, to get a very creditable draw, but Bayern take every game just as seriously. And we see that in every game that they go in. Even the DFB Pokal matches, we see that across the Bundesliga as well. But so let's maybe look at the rest of the pretenders, shall we, in this season, and we'll maybe go on to my boys, VfB, in a little while. But Emma, from your perspective, if we talk about teams that are usually up there and wanting to be in a title race, one of which, of course, is Borussia Dortmund, who were ever so close last season. The pain that they were all feeling across, Dortmund and associated with them. This season hasn't gone quite to plan, though, and we're not quite too sure what's been missing from Dortmund. The goals have kind of dried up. Obviously, the striker situation isn't quite working out for them so far. What have you made of Dortmund's work that you've seen from your end?
I think with Dortmund, you have to look at how last season ended. And, obviously, you can't sort of exist. Like, professional teams can't allow themselves too much hangover, but given how dramatic it was and how badly they bungled it, I think that some kind of hangover is inevitable. And then you lose your best player in Jude Bellingham. And then all of a sudden, you've got to try and replace, him effectively with multiple players, because you can't, replace a player of that talent with just one other player. I think it's been quite interesting that Dortmund, while they've struggled in the Bundesliga, they've come through probably the most difficult Champions League group with flying colours.
Yeah,
and I think almost for them, the Champions League has been a respite, because there's been comparatively little pressure. I think that having such a difficult Champions League group has actually been a good thing for Dortmund, because it's meant that they've been able to sort of concentrate on that with relatively little pressure. But I mean, think that they've got a weaker squad than they did last year, and then you've got teams like Leverkusen who are stronger than last year. Well, on Stuttgart, and then you've got teams like Leipzig who have remained as strong, and then all of a sudden Dortmund find themselves, through a combination of factors, suddenly find themselves taking a couple of steps back, and I think that's plenty of there's lots of different explaining factors for that. But I think that ultimately you can't have the end of last season that Dortmund had and then expect them to be able to pick up straight away. I mean, you can have, I think if you have an extraordinary season, whether for good or for bad, I can compare it to a couple of years ago when Liverpool won the Premier League for the first time in 30 years and the following season really struggled, at least in the first half of the season. That's following an extraordinarily good season. Dortmund had an extraordinarily disappointing season, and in both cases after that you're going to have a hangover, and I think that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, if we're looking a little bit further into the future, do we expect Dortmund to dip their toes into the market in the winter period that we've got coming up? Is it something they're really going to target? I mean, we've talked about the fullbacks plenty. I know you and Peter covered it in the watch along as well on yesterday. So what do we expect from Dortmund in the coming weeks? Is there, what pressure is there on Terzic, especially to see better performances in general? Because they're still up there just about, and, they're in the mix, but the performances are not pleasing fans.
Yeah, I think I've said it before on the show. I just think they're lacking that world-class player. I think we mentioned before, like almost every season for about the last, certainly since we've been covering the show, Rory, they've sold a world-class player every single summer. Obviously, Haaland is one of the most famous. Bellingham last year. You can't keep recovering from selling that level of player every time. And I think obviously in the pre-season, Rory, we kind of covered it. They were a little bit underwhelmed by some of the business that Dortmund had done over the summer. I think obviously Fulkrug came in as a number 9. He's done pretty well, but he's not got the same level of goals as like a Haaland, for example. We all know that.
Right.
He's got 4 or 5 goals, and his hold-up play is pretty good, but it's almost like replacing like Aguero with Peter Crouch or something. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work, basically. That's the problem. It's just, and I think one of the big problems is the drop of form of Sebastian Haller as well. Obviously, he was so good the back end of last season, so that the goals have dried up, and also the tactics are a little bit strange too. Like, I think I said to Peter yesterday that I've never seen a more defensive Dortmund team in all the time I've ever been watching football. And I think obviously the system that they play with 2 kind of holding midfielders, sometimes Emre Can, who had a great season last year but hasn't been that good this year. I think Sabitzer as well has been disappointing, in truth. I think he was meant to be the kind of replacement for Bellingham as that box-to-box midfielder, but from what I've seen, he's not anywhere near the same level nowadays. Obviously he was a great player at Leipzig, but then he had a kind of failed stint at Bayern Munich, and he's not doing that well at Dortmund either at the moment. I think, and yeah, the other problem is the fullbacks, basically. Like Rierson, despite getting the goal yesterday, he was torn apart by Frimpong, completely torn apart. I'm pretty sure he got past him 15 to 20 times in the match. That's no exaggeration. I think Marius Wolf is a little bit better defensively, but he's still no world beater, let's be honest. And I think, they might have to go, and I don't think Dortmund are going to splash out on fullbacks because they've not got enough money to do it, basically. I think they're going to have to be clever. They might have to go for someone a bit more attack-minded than Marius Wolf, I think, in truth. But they need to get that spark back. Yeah, I think Bino Gittins has been a kind of positive this season, the young Englishman as well. I think they also plucked him from Man City, didn't they, Bino Gittins? So, yeah, I think a lot of players coming over from England to Dortmund. He seems to be the latest one. And yeah, probably Julian Brand hasn't been on his top form, but they're just about keeping going. As Emma said, they've been good in the Champions League. They could even win that group, which would be fantastic. That could enable them to even reach the last 8 or even the semi-final of the Champions League. So it's not all bad for Dortmund, but I just think it's not the best Dortmund squad. That's the truth. And Terzic is doing okay with what he's got there, but they probably do need to dip the toes into the transfer market, if not in January, but next summer, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So one other team to come to maybe from a title race point of view is Leipzig. They have been, they started the season pretty well, and I think a lot of people are getting excited by their prospects, but we see them stutter. We've seen them drop silly points throughout the years of covering the show. Again, Emma, we've seen quite a lot of superstars leave Leipzig in recent years, whether it is, generally speaking, either to go to Bayern or into the Premier League. But we've seen some high-class players come into the club, no more so than Xavi Simons, of course, this season. But, otherwise, Leipzig has spent a lot of money, but some of their signings haven't gone as well. And some of them maybe aren't being utilised as much, no more so than Benjamin Sesko, who is a really, sought after property, out there in Europe right now. But he's sitting on the bench and watching Yusuf Poulsen still stride out onto the pitch. And is there anything around RB Leipzig that you thought has been, good or even bad? Because they're still up there. They've just been a bit too inconsistent as per.
Yeah, well, I suppose in terms of from a person who sort of covers more English football and European football, seeing them against Manchester City the other week in the Champions League, extremely impressive. And you look at that performance and you think it'd be right up there in the title race, but. Obviously, if then look at see that they're in fact like 9 points behind, and as you say, incredibly inconsistent form, like 3 wins, 2 defeats in the last 5 games. It's quite surprising. I think from Leipzig's perspective, it's a continued sort of question of how they sort of break the glass ceiling between finishing 3rd and 4th in the Bundesliga and finishing 1st, and I think that they've made, as you say, they've spent big in attempts to break that ceiling, but I think that if you've got a situation where you are, you know, as you say, struggling to find a consistent goal scorer, it's such a difficult thing to find, and outside of, you know, Bayern and maybe Stuttgart, I don't think there's many clubs that I've found that in the Bundesliga, and it's such a difficult thing to find. And Leipzig are discovering that. I mean, in any given 90 minutes, they could be the most impressive side in the Bundesliga, but across 4 or 5 games, they don't seem to be able to find that consistency yet.
Yeah, I don't think we need to cover Leipzig too much more, Mark. I mean, you know, we've discussed them quite a lot on the show recently. And again, just been frustrated by inconsistencies, maybe over-reliance on certain players. And again, Marco Rosa just not quite knowing what to do with his assets, missing Dani Olmo, of course, any team would do. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much further they go this season. Again, probably doing better in Europe than they are domestically right now. But, you know, again, they're still right in the mix. Right then, so we'll maybe just cover a couple of surprise packages that we've seen so far this season, and gladly we can start with my boys, BVB Stuttgart, who of course find themselves in third place. Another really impressive performance this weekend, and the returning, well, he's been back for a game or so now, but Serhou Guirassy, and we'll come to Danny's question as well in the chat about him, firing Stuttgart to a 2-0 home win and keeping the pressure on those around them. So they get an extra 2 points away from Dortmund, for example, because of that draw. They get 2 points closer to Leverkusen. First of all, we'll come to the question for you, Emma, from Danny is, are there any rumours about Serhou Guirassy over in England? How likely is it that a club will go for him in the winter market? I know my boys Man United have been linked with him. So have you heard much more about Serhou Guirassy in English circles?
He's not a name that's coming up particularly regularly. I mean, there are clubs in England which are looking for a striker. Arsenal have been, they've been talking about whether they need a centre forward to bolster their challenge. I think partly because of his injury and partly because he's not such a big name that I think that a lot of English clubs are looking. They don't want to spend a lot of money on a striker who's had half a good season and then comes and ends up not following through. But I mean, he's clearly shown this season that he has real talent, and when he comes back from injury, I mean, I think from a Stuttgart perspective, you'll want him to sort of like stay as under wraps from the Premier League as long as he possibly can. He, as any striker who's scoring at a decent clip in a top European league, will be linked to the biggest clubs in the Premier League. But I'd be surprised to see him move in the winter. Obviously, but you never know, and it depends how. At the end of December, if you have Man United or Arsenal who are still struggling badly for goals, struggling badly for a number 9, then you may well see his name. But to be honest, I think if he comes back from injury and he keeps on scoring at the rate that he was beforehand, then you will definitely see him linked with some of the biggest teams for next summer, maybe. Yeah,
and on that point, with players coming and going from the Bundesliga into the Premier League, do we think that that's generally speaking an attractive prospect? Because it would seem that players from the Bundesliga are often undervalued, or they have really attractive release clauses that, again, something that me and Mark have irked about on several occasions, and it's something that we don't like to see because we see all these great players leave the Bundesliga. But is that something different that, again, you see, Emma, because the Bundesliga, it has these, often these quite generous release clauses in contracts of players?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you do have to an extent the feeling that the Bundesliga is, a place where Premier League clubs can pick up talent. And I think there is a certain amount of English exceptionalism. It's where people think, oh well, they've only done it in Germany. Can they do it on a cold Tuesday night in Burnley or whatever? But I think that maybe Haaland to an extent has helped counter that, because of the fact that there were questions about whether or not he could carry on his form in the Bundesliga, in the Premier League, and the answer to that was no, he's going to be even better. Although I do say that after Sunday, where he, missed a hatful of chances. So hey, maybe this is the start of the downturn that all the naysayers were predicting 18 months ago. But I think that there is certainly an element that certainly the biggest teams in the Premier League will be looking at who is starring in the Bundesliga, certainly from a forward perspective, and how can we, and whether or not those they can bring those talents over to the Premier League. And I mean, certainly you look at another striker who's turning up at Stuttgart, Dennis Undav, was sent when Roberto De Zerbi asked about him being sent out on loan. He was basically saying that effectively it's very much we will be looking forward to be welcoming back next summer. And certainly if he comes back having scored 20 goals this season in the Bundesliga, which he's currently we wouldn't put him past him with the rate he's been scoring, he will be going straight into that Brighton starting 11, which is as it stands, a Europa League starting 11. So yeah, there is certainly an extent to which the best players and the best goal scorers in the Bundesliga are definitely of interest in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, do we think that Stuttgart are going to hang on to their assets during the winter breaks because of how attractive and what amazing run they've been on so far this season?
Yeah, I think they will, to be honest, because obviously Champions League is, I know, Rory, you're going to kind of kick me for saying this, but it's looking more and more likely, to be honest, as the weeks go on, isn't it? I mean, they just don't stop winning. They don't stop dominating games. They're not just going away to play some kind of nicking a 1-0 lucky win. They're just absolutely battering teams. And Werder Bremen were the latest for the machine, basically. They just completely rolled them over. It should have been way more than the 2-0 it was, in truth. And it was great to see Undav and Guirassy both scoring as well, because obviously that was the first game both of them started together, which was great to see. I just think, there's other players as well. I think maybe even Mio is a player that could potentially be looked at in the Premier League. He's a Frenchman. The Premier League do like Frenchmen as well, and he's a very good player at the end of the day, Mio. I think he's a player to look at. I think also possibly Ito as well. He was already linked with Ajax, I think. And I think even though he's injured now, he is a player that could potentially make a move over there. But I don't think they'll lose any in January. I really don't, because I think what will probably happen is they'll wait to the end of the season, see if they get Champions League, and then basically decide, are we going to sell them for bigger money? Because if they get in the Champions League, that'll raise the price even more, because the power's in Stuttgart's hands then. Because they'll have the Champions League money coming in, and they can just say, sod you, basically. If they undercut them, they can just say, well, we've already got like 60, 70 million plus coming in just from the Champions League. So even if they qualify just for the Europa League, which is looking very, very likely as things stand, barring a collapse in the second half of the season, they should at least get that. So, I think maybe next summer I'd be worried, Rory, but I think for now, things are looking okay. It's probably, as I say, Guirassy and Mio will attract attention, maybe even Nubel as well, because he is an up-and-coming keeper. He's not even out of the race of getting in the Germany national team, to be honest. He's been that good so far. So, I think there's a lot of assets at the club, but I think they will hold on to them until the end of the season for me.
Yeah, let's hope so, and long may their run continue this season. Maybe some other surprises so far this season, maybe from a negative perspective, which you'll be aware of as well this season, Emma, is obviously their European prospects have been okay, but Union Berlin obviously have been flying ever since they joined the Bundesliga since promotion a few seasons ago. Improving under Urs Fischer, this absolute fairy tale of them getting into the top four and qualifying for the Champions League for the first time ever. But this season, regrettably for Union fans and for the Berlin club, they're rock bottom. They've obviously had to end their partnership, their long associated partnership with Urs Fischer as well. Is this a typical one of a team getting into the Champions League and perhaps just, well, losing those standards and what got them there? Or is it the money that was, forayed away on the likes of Bonucci, or players that, they didn't necessarily need and they should have gone for a different angle perhaps with their first, because obviously they're stepping up in regards to the Champions League, but they had been in Europe for the last few seasons as well. So that, that's not a different thing, but it's maybe just the way that they built their squad this season.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing. And when I did a piece about Union Berlin before the start of their Champions League campaign, and at that point, everything was looking, golden. There was plenty of hope, Pep's to be able to challenge Real Madrid, Napoli for a spot in the top two in the Champions League group, and there was cautious optimism. But I mean, when I spoke to a few Bundesliga fans for the piece that I did about Union Berlin, and one of them said, "Oh well," and I was asking what would constitute a successful season. And one of them was saying, "Oh well, all we want is just 40 points and survival this season." And it's like, and I just thought, oh well, that's a cute line, and then just realised that. And then now, as we approach Christmas, maybe that's an over-ambitious goal. So it didn't take it seriously when they said, "Oh, well, we're just looking for survival this year." But I think that ultimately they have been a little bit unsettled by playing in the Champions League for the first time, playing those Champions League games at Hertha Berlin's ground, at the Olympiastadion, rather than at their usual home ground, which was from a technical perspective completely understandable, and you can understand like the economic reasons and the football reasons. But Union Berlin is, I mean, anyone with even a modicum of knowledge about German football and European football knows about the Union Berlin story and about how fan-led that club is. And I think that more than any other club I reckon in Germany, and possibly more than many in Europe, if you unsettle the fans, then you unsettle the club. And I think that the fans were unsettled by the sudden move to signing star names without a definitive plan about the move to play the Champions League games at, the Olympiastadion. And I think, and also, when you have the, Union Berlin's story since they got into the Bundesliga, the story of the last 5 years has been absolutely remarkable in terms of the momentum that they've had. Second Bundesliga, Conference League, Europa League, Champions League is incredible. But even 5 years of progress, it can be. And 5 years of momentum can be lost in just a couple of games. It's so much easier to lose momentum than it is to gain it. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've seen that encapsulated in Union Berlin. I'll be honest, even despite their absolutely abysmal form, I was a little surprised when they let Urs Fischer go. I don't know about you guys. I mean, that would seem absolutely mad to say about any other club which loses 8 or 9 games in a row, particularly as a club that's got like Champions League ambitions. But I was a little surprised when they decided to pull the trigger, because it seemed like that if any club was going to sort of stick with a man to pull them out of it, it would be Union. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, myself and Mark, we've done a little bit on this here and there on some of our shows, haven't we? But it seemed to be just a kind of a mutual parting in a sense, much like there was with Buzz Svensson leaving Mainz, and the fact that, Urs Fischer had been part of this journey and will never be forgotten. But, maybe I cannot take this team any further, no matter how much my players are backing me and how much they're giving everything to the cause. Mark, I mean, your surprise was there amongst mine, but it was a surprise, but also it kind of had to be done just to try and change the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's absolutely terrible. It really is terrible that Urs Fischer isn't the manager of Union Berlin. But I think basically what happened was, as you said, Emma, that they signed a lot of like top players and it just didn't work out. Basically, like none of the big signings, like Bonucci had kind of quite vocal. A lot of people think he had arguments with Fischer behind the scenes. He was dropped. I think he's been dropped twice over the season already. Obviously, he's going to be on huge money. Obviously, the European Championship winner from 2021, Bonucci. The other one was Fofana as well. Also had an argument with Fischer on the touchline. He refused to shake his hand. He was banned by the club for 2 matches. Like, there's been a lot of crap going on behind the scenes as well. And do you know what? One thing I wouldn't be surprised is if Bonucci and Fofana are both released in January. Actually, I can actually see that. I think Bonucci has just been a complete car crash signing. He's just not worked out at all. And Fofana clearly has issues. He made a good start, but since that incident, he's not done very much at all, has he? So I can actually see maybe even Aronson as well. I've heard that they're not happy with what Aronson's doing. I think he's only on loan from Leeds, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see him get kicked out as well. I think we're going to see a lot of those big names actually kicked out in January. That's my view. And I think they'll go back to basics.
I suppose it depends whether or not Leeds have got a break clause. I mean, Aronson didn't exactly tear Ellen Road up, so I'm not sure that Leeds will be that happy to have him back a bit too early. But I think you are right, and certainly they've made all these huge signings and they haven't, for the most part, worked out. And you wouldn't be surprised if the new man wants to start again, or at least try and get the club back to its roots and sort of like in a way to get it out of the hole that it's found itself in.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. So with what time we have left with Emma tonight, we might just do a bit more of a quick run through and summary of what else is going on at the bottom end of the league. Obviously, we've got Union, and we've already quickly touched upon Mainz, them being down there, the sad parting between them and Boris Svensson. And, we've seen a little bit more of an improvement from Mainz. Particularly strange to see those two in, bottom and second bottom place. And, we've got the two new boys still hovering above with, Darmstadt and Heidenheim. And then we've got Bochum and Köln in the mix. As per usual with relegation races, Emma, and, obviously you'll maybe not have covered these sides as much on your travels, but has it been a shock to you to see the likes of obviously Union, Mainz down there, Köln, who obviously Mark tipped to the start of the season to struggle, but they've been a side who have been, enjoying a really good run under Stefan Baumgart, in the league as well. So seeing those teams down there with the two new boys is a bit of a shock to our system so far this season.
Yeah. Berlin, obviously Union Berlin, we've touched on. Mainz, again, it's the case, as you say, a sort of sad ending, but I suppose it's what happens really when you have a smaller club with a inspirational coach. I mean, you can have that successful, but it's very difficult to maintain. When you've got like sort of a churn of players. So I think that with Mainz, I suppose we see it sometimes we've seen it in the league with Southampton, for example, who had incredibly successful sort of period for a while, but in the end you have that churn of players and coaches, and eventually your time runs out. And I think that might be an extent of that with Mainz. Obviously teams down there as well. I mean, Heidenheim and Darmstadt, particularly in the case of Heidenheim, anything that's above that bottom two is a success. And I think that we'll continue to just try and scrape to as many points as possible. One team that I think that could well be seeing more from after the winter break is Bochum. I think that it's more concerning for a team if you're playing well and losing than if you're playing well and then drawing. And Bochum, they've drawn 7 out of 13 games. Managed to get just second win of the season, 3-1 against Wolfsburg. They are now unbeaten in 5 games. This is for a team that regularly expected to struggle at the bottom of the league. I think that Bochum have enough about them to turn a few of those draws into wins and keep themselves at the very least. They're up to 12th now, and it is very congested in that bottom half of the table. But I think that Bochum will have. I think that they're a team that I'd pick to, very much keep their heads above water in the second half of the year.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, no, absolutely. Mark, any thoughts on what our relegation race stands at the moment? I mean, we're seeing Heidenheim and Darmstadt get drawn back into it after they had some really encouraging, middle months, I guess, when they had some spectacular results. But I mean, the form book doesn't lie, and the squads are being tested from a depth point of view, and obviously they're conceding too many goals.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Heidenheim at the minute because I think they couldn't have played better, but they've not got as many points on the board as the performances have deserved. And to be honest, the last couple of games have dropped off for me a little bit. They only lost 2-1 against Leipzig, but that game could have been 5 or 6 in truth. I mean, Leipzig created so many chances. I think Openda must have missed more chances than any player I've ever seen in that game, really. He must have missed about 8 chances, really. But yeah, regardless of that, I think as much as we all love Heidenheim and, Bester, Kleindienst, Peeringer, they've got so many good attackers, but my concern with them is the defense is poor, like really poor at times, and Mainka, who I kind of tipped up before the season, just hasn't managed to kind of man that defense well enough for me. That's the problem. And I think they really need probably like a big signing in defense to shore up that and put a bit more Bundesliga experience in there. And I think it doesn't have to be a world-beating player, but just someone who has a bit of experience at this level and knows how to kind of grind out clean sheets and things like that, because they aren't very good defensively. And I think they should be good enough to stay up, really, because they've got goals in the side, they create chances. But I am a bit worried about them. I remember someone I know in Germany a few months ago said, I still think Heidenheim will get relegated. And I said, no chance, absolutely no chance they'll go down. He said the season is long. That's what he said. And it sounds like he was right in some ways, because the last few results, it seems as though it's been a while since they won a game, to be honest, Heidenheim. And they're still not playing badly, but as I say, 11 points from 13 games is no stellar return, really, in truth. And if they had 5-6 more points, you'd say they'd be fine, but they don't. And obviously, Cologne is starting to grind out results now. They ground out that win at Darmstadt. Stefan Baumgart's men, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to get results at this level. Mainz, I still expect to get better, really. I know I've been saying that for weeks now, but I just don't think the squad is bad enough to get relegated for me. But they do need to start winning games and fast. Darmstadt, they're probably the weakest team in the league, to be honest, Darmstadt, and they probably will go down. I'm pretty sure of that. But I think the other spot and the playoff spot it's anyone's game at the minute down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So as we're coming towards an end, I just want to push a couple of extra questions there in the comments and then finish off with just one more for Emma, as I know, obviously, we're, on the clock. So one in from Moritz, regular viewer. So evening, Moritz. Hope you're doing well. Obviously, be pleased with the Köln result. So obviously, Köln have got a couple of winnable games ahead against Mainz and Union Berlin before the winter break. Do you think they win those? Well, we can just do a quick round the table. I mean, I think there'll be close games, to be honest. I can see a few draws in there as well, Moritz, because, like we say, we think Mainz are starting to improve. We don't know what to expect from Union at the moment now. Quickly, Emma, what are your thoughts on Köln? Do you expect them to try and pick up a couple more big wins before the winter break?
I mean, obviously they are sort of good with matches on paper, and winning away to Darmstadt was such a huge result for Köln, moving them out of that bottom 3. In the end, if you are a team like Köln who are tipped to struggle, then you need to beat the teams around you. So I think that if they it's still the first half of the season, but I do think they do need to pick up results against Mainz and Union Berlin. But it will be a struggle because you've got that new manager bounce with both Mainz and Union Berlin. I think as you say, those will be really, really good games. But I'm still yet to be completely convinced by Köln, and I think that they could still very much be around that bottom 3 and potentially in it come the winter break.
Yeah, absolutely. Moritz saying as well, Werder dropping into the bottom 3 before the winter as well. Unfortunately for them, they are. I mean, they did look a little bit toothless against Stuttgart at the weekend. So interesting thoughts there. Mark, do you see much from Köln before the winter break? Obviously, important win, just very quickly.
Yeah, it's really tough, to be honest. Yeah, I think that Mainz game is absolutely massive, actually. That's the biggest of those three because they've got to be winning that game at home. And I think if they can win that, then that really will give them momentum going into the Freiburg away and obviously the final game against Union away. You know, it's I could see them getting 4 points, to be honest. I think they'll win and draw one of the Mainz and Union games. I think they'll lose in Freiburg because Freiburg is still a very strong home team, let's be honest. I could see them getting 4 points there. Whether that's enough, I don't know. But like, as we've said before, it's been a snail's race at the bottom of the league this year. And we'll just have to see who can kind of scrape together the most points before Christmas.
Indeed, that's grand. And then just finishing off, rounding ourselves back to Leverkusen, quite fittingly, obviously based on Emma's article. Craig has asked, can Xabi Alonso become the world's best coach, Emma?
He can certainly manage the world's best teams. I would not be surprised if in a couple of years' time he's managing one of his former sides, whether that's Liverpool or Real Madrid. The question is whether he'd be able to deal with this the pressure of either of those sides, which I'd imagine that he certainly could. I mean, you take, for example, compare him to his old Liverpool sort of midfield buddy Steven Gerrard, and certainly Alonso has made a much more impressive start to his coaching career. But obviously, Gerrard made a very successful start to his career at Rangers and then struggled with Aston Villa. Sort of making that jump from a very decent club in Leverkusen to a world to making that jump is difficult. But I certainly think that he can cope. I certainly think he's shown both in his career at Spain and then moving to Germany that he deserves an opportunity to coach at one of the biggest clubs in Europe. The question is, and then obviously it's a case of whether or not he'll be able to handle that pressure. But I mean, he's a as I said at the start, he was a born winner as a player. He has that winning mentality. I think that he certainly has all the tools there. It's just a case of now whether he finds the right club for the right circumstance in order to let those talents show.
Absolutely. Great stuff. So yeah, we'll bring it to a close as we're running short on time, and obviously certain teams, unfortunately, we haven't been able to touch on, but we'll be back to talk much more about those in our prediction show, which will be back with you on Thursday. A bit of a shout out as well, because we're doing yet another watch along. Mark and Peter are joining forces, or maybe going against each other for the big DFB Pokal match between FC Nuremberg and Kaiserslautern. That should be a particularly fun watch with those two on screen. So yeah, I'll hand over to yourself, Mark, to just finish up tonight's show.
Yeah, come on there, club. Yeah. Okay, anyway, yeah. So, yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, if you enjoyed what you saw today, then check out @OverTheBarFB and @OverTheBarExtra. Also follow Rory personally on Twitter as well with @VillageFooty. Yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as well, because we're slowly getting towards our goals. And yeah, recommend our show to your friends, your family, anyone in Germany or English-speaking countries, or anywhere in the world, really, that is interested in Bundesliga football. As Rory said, we will be doing the watch along at 6 p.m. German time, so it is an earlier than usual on Tuesday night. But come in and check Kaiserslautern versus FC Nuremberg. Watch along then. Thank you again to Emma for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye, guys.